Okay, welcome to CSSBattle Challenge Donut. Um, so we'll be working on building this design on the right side here, and obviously all the work that we do will show up here. So our job is to replicate this design. Um, yeah, so let's get started. So here on the left we have the editor. Of course, as usual, we have our HTML and CSS on the same plane here. Just makes it easier to apply both at the same time. So, okay, so just some thought process before I get started here. Obviously, we have this really outer container here that is basically our body, or we'll call it the container div that will hold everything else inside it. And inside the container, we can say that this is vertically and horizontally centered. So we can achieve that through either flexboxes or CSS grid, or actually just use some sort of a relative or absolute positioning. I'm going to try with flexboxes today and see how that goes. If that doesn't work, we'll revert back to maybe using some sort of relative or absolute positioning for these. So that covers the outer circle, right? But how do we make this work? Well, if you sort of think about it, this is, you could sort of think about this as like a square, say, or like a rectangular shape here that just gets hidden underneath, right? Or basically inside this YOLO container. So in a sense, you could use some sort of a Z index to hide this, but still show some part of it. And of course, the third part is this circle in the middle. Even though it looks like it's something that is sitting, um, like it's like a transparent background of this container, which again, it could still work that way, but I think it just make it easier to have three separate elements, which are obviously the outer YOLO circle, then this square that will sit maybe right in the on the top left corner somewhere, and then you will have your like another circle that has the same color or background color as the container. Okay, so let's get started. So here we have our div. I'm going to give this a class of container. This container again represents this outer container wrapper that sort of sits at the very outer layer. Inside that, we'll have again this YOLO circle, right? So we'll say this is another div here. Oops. Div here, and this div, let's just say it's an outer circle. And because we have two other contents inside that, that's why I'm going to maybe put another two divs, one representing this square part and the other representing the circle that sits inside of it. Not inside of the square, obviously, inside of the outer circle. So the first one, I'll say this is the inner circle, and the one there's another square, of course, that will say I don't know, top left square. I'm sure you could probably rename some of these classes to better names, but this makes sense to me, so I'll go with that. Great, that covers the basic skeleton of what we need to build. Next, let's work on the CSS. The first thing I like to do is just get rid of any kind of default styling that gets added by our browser to either the body tag or some other elements inside the DOM. So what I tend to do all the time when I usually do CSS battles is target the body and all the elements that sits inside the body and give this a margin of 0, padding of 0, and border box, or I say box sizing of border box. Cool. Now let's go ahead and target this container here. I'm going to give this a background color of this color here. Copy that color, paste it in. Obviously we don't see anything because we haven't given any sort of width and height to this container. Because that width and height is basically 100% of the body, I'm going to use width of 100 view width and height of 100 view height. There we have it. Now let's work on the inner circle, sorry, not the inner circle, the outer circle. So as I mentioned, I'm going to try out flex boxes and see how that goes. It might not place items exactly, centered vertically or horizontally. We'll see. But let's give it a try. So here is our outer circle. I'm going to give it a width of. This looks to me like maybe 200 pixels, but that could be a lot. Let's just say 200 pixels, and a height of 200 pixels, and this is a border radius of 50% because this is a circle. And I'm going to give it a background of this color here. Obviously it shows up here. We want to center it vertically and horizontally. So we're going to go into the container here, give it a display of flex, justify content center, and align items center. Nice. Looks like it is perfectly centered, so that's beautiful. Next thing we can do is we can work on the circle, actually, the inner circle, because this one might be a little bit tricky in terms of where to position that square. So one thing I think it makes sense is if we just apply display flex to this inner circle as well, because this circle is vertically and horizontally centered inside the outer circle. So I'm going to target the inner circle here, and I'm going to give it a width of maybe, I don't know, 100 pixels, and a height of 100 pixels, and border radius of 50%, and a background of this same color as the container. Obviously shows up at the top left. It's kind of cool. It's like a moon shape. That's a very interesting design. Anyway, got a little bit off topic there. Okay, so how do we center this vertically and horizontally? Again, the same idea as what we applied to the container. I'm going to copy this display flex, bit of CSS there, paste it into the outer circle, and there you have it. Oops, I almost lost my CSS. Okay. All right. Well, we got back what we wanted. That's good. Anyway, so the outer circle, actually the inner circle is probably a little bit bigger than I sort of assumed. So I'm going to say this is maybe 120. 120 might be too much perhaps. No, 120 is perfect. Awesome. Great. So that covers the inner circle. Now let's work on the top left square here. So the top left square is sitting inside of the outer circle, right? Not inside the inner circle. So I'm going to target this. Let's say this has a width of 100 pixels, height of 100 pixels, maybe. Again, we could always change those things around. Give it a background of this orange color. It's positioned. So we're going to run into some issues because we use flex boxes. So to get around that, so the reason why this is not going to work with flex boxes is because, again, we have two items that are sort of sitting inside the outer circle. So they're sort of aligned but right next to each other, as opposed to if we were to use something like relative or absolute positioning, we would have more control over how to place each of these items inside that outer circle. So enough words, let's just sort of show you how to make that happen. So I'm going to get rid of all the flexbox CSS here, and I'm going to give it a position relative here, and the inner circle is going to get a position absolute. Obviously, when we do that, the inner circle moves all the way to the top. So how do we bring that down 50% and to the right 50% is by using top and left properties. So I'm going to say top is 50%, left is 50%, and I'm going to use the transform translate property to basically say, hey, move this item from the center, not from top left, because that's what happens by default. So when we move the item focusing on the focal point, or basically making the center of the shape as the position to move from, that's when it sort of positions itself on the center. So I'm going to use translate of negative 50% to negative 50%. Oops, sorry, I think it's negative 50%. And there you have it. Awesome. So that sort of covers most of it, really. In fact, it also covers the square. As you can see, the square is almost perfect, except the fact that the square's content sort of overflows, or basically goes outside of the yellow circle. So how we get around that is actually really simple. All we do is say overflow hidden. Maybe I spoke too quickly. Sorry, not to the square. You apply that to the outer circle of overflow hidden. So that basically says any items inside of this outer circle, if it goes outside of it somehow, just don't show it. So that's where the property overflow hidden comes in really handy. And as you can see, I think this is pretty much perfect. You see some mismatches here and there, but I think this is pretty good. Let's go ahead and submit it. Here we go. That's a 100% match. So that covers Donut, CSSBattle Donut, number 160. Until next time, later.